Hello, my name is Austin. I'm the director here at Fishtown Films. You can see our work here on our channel, or you can check out our feature, Citywide, now streaming on Amazon and Vimeo. I'll put the link in the description down below. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to Stumble Upon. I'm Austin.
And I'm Emily. Today we are discussing Tremors, directed by Ron Underwood.
As always, there'll be plenty of swearing and spoilers.
But if that doesn't scare you, the desert should, because you never know if your lack of pole vaulting skills will be your doom.
As a kid, I really did think that pole vaulting kind of fit into that category of quicksand, of things that was really going to be a problem for me if I didn't know how to do.
Yeah.
And just like quicksand, I learned nothing about pole vaulting.
Yeah, that tracks. That tracks.
This episode brought to you by Citywide, now streaming on Amazon.
Rent or purchase tonight. Host a movie night. Invite all your friends over and know that every dollar spent on supporting indie filmmakers like us helps us make the next sapphic indie.
Tremors. It's an interesting film to me because I remember in the early 90s being a kid seeing it on like the USA Network a whole bunch because I don't remember it coming out in cinemas, but from everything I've read and seen, it didn't do that well. It was not a success. It was not something that was pining for the 8 or 9 sequels that it has now accumulated over time.
Right. I didn't even know it had that many.
It has become quite a franchise for Michael Gross, who plays the survivalist dad or the survivalist husband in the film. But I remember seeing it all the time. I remember the very end of the film where the graboid flies out of the wall of the canyon and lands and crashes, and my dad turning to me as it crashed goes, "It kind of looks like a calzone." And it never, ever not being that all these years later, 30 years later, still being like, "Oh yeah, it kind of looks like a calzone."
It does look like a calzone.
So
you hadn't said that before, and now I can't unsee it.
yeah, I have kept that internal. Every time I've seen it, I'm like, "Oh yeah, that kind of looks like a calzone."
I mean, your dad was spot on.
Yeah, he was not wrong.
It was pretty gory.
Yeah, it's an interesting film. We were watching and listening to some behind the scenes features about it. It reminded me of some other things that I've been reading recently. And the point of this is that they were chatting about how hard it was to market the film and how hard it was to sell the film before it was made, because what type of film is it? It is now what we would understand as like an action comedy or a horror comedy, something that people like Joss Whedon kind of took to the forefront of our pop culture brains with Buffy. But before then, you didn't really have it. You had elements of this type of film in the Evil Dead films that Sam Raimi was doing, but those also weren't successful films. They got him more work, but they weren't people weren't clamoring to go see those films.
And Sam Raimi's Evil Deads, they were after this, right?
No, the Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, I believe, were before.
Oh, interesting. And yet, so there still was no vocabulary for the blending of the genres.
Right. I mean, and yes, quick check, they were almost a decade before.
Wow.
Evil Dead 1 is 9 years before. Evil Dead 2 is 3 years before. But those were super fucking low budget films. They were films in which nobody knew anything about the people who made them. There was no studio buy-in. They were just making them because they were a bunch of friends who wanted to make a fucking horror film and scare the pants off of their other friends. So they were kind of creating this new genre of horror comedy at the time. And even today in cinema, I was reading this article that Elizabeth Olsen was talking about how difficult it is for her to get a couple of the films that she wants to make made, because every studio head is like, what genre is it? How do we sell it? What is this thing? And thinking about how cinema works now compared to how it worked before in some ways. We've been watching a bunch of film noirs, and those film noirs were not known as film noirs as they were being made. They weren't. The term film noir wasn't coined until the 1960s by the French, looking back at the genre of films that had been coming out of America the previous decade, they were just known at the time as melodramas. And so it feels like we're almost in this era, and we've been kind of skirting this era for a while, because Tremors just kind of pops its flag up early on as an example of this, of like, well, if we don't know who we're selling it to, why are we going to make it?
Yeah.
And I think that's the interesting thing about talking about this film is, what are all the incredible elements that went into this film that prove that it was really worth making, from like how handcrafted the film is to what narrative thesis it has about its characters and how people treat each other. Like, what kind of America this film is showing out, and what kind of America we're now presenting out.
Well, that's a really interesting question, because it was something we've talked about a couple of times as we've watched this film, many times actually. But what we've noticed right from the start was that you have a scientist who is played by a female, and you have two working class people who are played by heteronormative men. And there's a variety of different ages in this cast, and yet everyone believes everyone else. And there's, as they say in the documentary behind the scenes, there are no bad guys.
Yeah.
Everyone is in support of each other to try to make this work. And we believe the scientists and the experts, and we believe the preppers know what they're doing in terms of being prepared for things. But we also believe that the working class guys will have ideas, and we should trust that they can execute them. There's a faith in everyone that we've lost currently, especially in our new political administration that's stepping up, that just is making everyone othered.
Yeah.
And in this film, these are all the others coming together to work together. You have the Chinese store owner, you have the single mom, you have the scientist, and you have the working class and the preppers. I mean, these are all people that can work together.
And you have Miguel, who we also don't know what his job is, but we have ethnic diversity within the film that isn't pointed out as each one is specifically who they are based on their ethnicity. They're who they are based on what character they are and what they're doing. And everybody brings a different thing to the table that helps solve the problem of, how do we get out of this town where there are giant worms under the ground that are trying to eat us?
Yeah. And I love that we never know where the worms came from, if they're going to come back. We don't know. We just know that there's 3 in the spot right now, and that's it. And I like that we don't answer any of those questions. We just see a group of people work together to survive.
What's interesting as well about the film and what you're saying is that it is focused on the present. Everybody's trying to figure it out in the moment. And even when they bring up like questions like, where do you think they came from? Nobody has any answers, but like, they're all wonderfully conspiratorial. Like they're exactly how we would all kind of interact with the idea of like, there's this giant worm. Maybe it's this thing. Maybe it's this random thing. Maybe it's this crazy idea that I have. None of it really matters. And nobody digs themselves in so hard that we can't possibly think of like, or we can't possibly think that there is any other answer than what it is. The only answer is, how do we get out of this fucking town before we all die?
Yeah. We got to get to the mountains.
Yep.
We got to get to the rocks.
We got to get someplace where they can't get us.
Yeah. I love it. I don't know. It's a really simple story. Cut everybody off by cutting off the roads. Cut everybody off by cutting out the ability to communicate with telephones. This is obviously pre-cell phones and pre-satellites and pre-internet. So that's great because we can cut that off. But it's not that difficult to do that now. You can always find a way to... We have a cat visiting us right now. Hi, Satoshi. That's okay.
I think to jump back for a second, like you went through all the different people who were part of this community. I think that kind of breaking that down just to show it off of what America, the town also wonderfully named Perfection. It is not perfect in any way. It is really handmade. There are just shacks. Like the community itself, it's unclear. I don't know if it's muddled intentionally or if it's just muddled because it doesn't matter. But there are characters like Melvin, who you have no idea who his parents are. Does he live there on his own? Like, is he a runaway? Is he, what is his name? Nestor's kid? who is Melvin? Like, it's unclear. And while it's kind of troubled me over years, it doesn't really troubled me in the sense of I don't know who this person is. I don't understand the relationship, but I do understand that the people in the town care for him. Mm-hmm. And everybody, all of these outcasts, these othered people are here and care for each other in this town. And it's really interesting that that's the version of America that they're trying to present. As you said, there are preppers here. Mm-hmm. There's a Chinese American or Chinese immigrant who runs the local store. There's our main two leads who are handymen who do everything in town. There's there's an artist with her daughter who makes pottery, I think. Mm-hmm. There are just all these different kind of archetypes of handyman, prepper, artist, local store owner, and they all are part of a community that works well together. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to have those sorts of parts floating around and allow them to interact the way that the film does.
What I like is that no one is ridiculed for who they are. They might be teased for doing something that's not the sharpest tool in the shed moment. You know, they might be like, oh, wow, you made that choice. I'm going to ridicule you for that. Or laughed at for having the sewer pipe explode on them, or things like that.
Or someone rolling their eyes at having so many guns for the preppers.
But yet they all respect each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really missing currently in our cinema. Yeah. I think we are so quick to other each other and to shit on each other for being different, or to make sure there's someone in every movie that's the other that we can pick on. So we are all on the same team as that person is wrong.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean the bad guy we're supposed to dislike, but rather just anyone that is other than what is supposed to be the right side of things.
Yeah, and nobody's perfect in this film either. Like, you think about the films that we watch, like we were watching Twisters, the new Twister film last week, and they all seem perfect at their jobs. Like our lead, she can sense the weather and she knows what's coming, and it's so Christ-like in their presentation of these people who are infallible. Val would never be able to solve the last issue, the final issue with the Graboids, if he didn't have Bert and Heather's bombs. Mm-hmm. Like, each person can play their part to make the whole. There's nobody who has everything.
Who answers every question, is perfect and the best at it.
Right. And Val wouldn't get to where he gets without Earl. And he wouldn't, and Val and Earl wouldn't get to where they get without Rhonda. Mm-hmm. And Rhonda is the seismologist, who I should also have mentioned in the breakdown of all the different groups. The scientist,
the expert.
Everybody has a different thing that they are good at, and all of the things that they are good at help solve the final issues.
Yeah, even pointing that out, Rhonda, the expert, the scientific expert, is a seismologist. She's not. She doesn't have a focus on...
She's not a wormologist?
But she's not a wormologist. She's not focused on creatures underneath the soil.
Right.
She's not studying bugs. She's not there being like, oh, I'm an invertebrate master, understanding every kind. She's just there to study earthquakes and the movement of the earth, which is a perfect person to have there with her, because she can figure things out quickly. But on the other hand, there's not any... All she's offering is that things are moving.
Yeah.
And I could see that they're moving, and I could tell that there's 3 things that are moving.
And when she's directly asked to solve, like, where are these come from? She's like, I don't know.
Why would I know that?
Like, that's not my profession.
And she's so excited about what it means once they all kind of solve that they've killed the 3 of them.
Yeah.
But prior to that, she's just a badass who's willing to fucking jump in and survive. Mm-hmm. I love that she's super strong. I love that she's kind. I love that she wants to play. Mm-hmm. But other than that, she doesn't have, like, a 6-pack abs, and nor does Val, and nor does Earl. Yeah. Or if they're ripped, it's just because they happen to be dancers and strong.
Yeah.
But there's not this, like, rip off all your clothes and be perfect hard bodies.
Yeah.
But there is sexuality and chemistry, unlike in Twisters, which we were talking about. There's no kiss.
Yeah.
What the fucking point is Twisters? There's no, you're in these crazy situations and you're not making out, you're not having sex.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, it's one of the most like drawing a comparison to those two films, like for this moment again, like the end of the two films couldn't be more different. Like Val goes up and kisses Rhonda. The end of Twisters is they get interrupted by the TSA, I guess.
It's real weak.
And you're like, come on, guys. Like, fucking hell. Like, we all know Olympic athletes go to the Olympics in part to perform, but also to fuck.
Yeah.
Like, they're just, like, it's not.
Come on.
Come on.
The adrenaline of chasing Twisters and you're not all sleeping together?
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah.
So I like that there's chemistry. I like that there's actual, even though it's a tiny kiss, it's just a little bit at the end. There's at least an acknowledgement that we went through this thing and we're trauma bonded.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens with it.
Well, and also it's not like they're dressed incredibly sexy either.
No, I love her outfits with her giant socks.
Yeah, and the sunscreen on her nose.
The
like
zinc on her nose.
Oh, it's so fucking gross.
It's
like
so 80s.
Like it's so charming. Like everything about the production design of this film is so fucking charming. It feels so clear and so lived in that like I know that the town was made up. I know that they just bought the shacks off the street and then repurposed them in this town and created the whole sets and the whole identity for the town so that it could be there for them to do with whatever they needed to.
Yes, we watched a documentary about the making of perfection. And it's really interesting, as you said, in order to get the look of really old beat up buildings, the set designer literally bought beat up buildings off the side of the road, deconstructed them and reconstructed them. They made the set of perfection. They said 30 miles south of Lone Pine, which if you are interested in the Pacific Crest Trail, you know about Lone Pine. It's a spot along the PCT and it was kind of exciting for me to find out it was shot there. So this is in a beautiful swath of desert where they shot the film. The weather is up and down and all over the place all the time. I can only imagine how beautiful it was to be there. They talked about the dust and the dirt and how challenging it was to work on these sets with all this nature happening all around them. Don't drink a seltzer while you're recording a podcast because you won't stop burping.
Solid.
But I digress. Yeah, they talked about it. And what I love about this is a great transition, is the set construction and the special effects. These are done by craftspeople. This, as a low-budget film, is something they talk about a lot. It's a low-budget film. It's a low-budget film. They all worked really hard to pull this off with no money, but lots of skill and talent and heart. And that screams throughout the whole film. You can hear it loud and clear. These people worked really, really hard to make something authentic and tangible, and they were very successful at it.
Yeah.
And I think that we are really losing that craftsmanship nowadays in our CG-laden cinema that is just so green screen and distilled and frankly bland.
Flat.
Yeah.
Like, to me it runs flat. Seeing the graboids and seeing the puppets that they made, seeing like from the puppetry that they're doing, the full-size bodysuit little monsters to the miniatures that they made. Like there's something really incredibly tactile. It's the same thing that I feel when I'm like watching a Wallace and Gromit film or any sort of stop motion and being like, okay, so there's a craft to this. There's like, I can see the fingerprints. After they've killed one of the graboids, there's a scene where they're touching the graboid and they're pulling on the little spikes that help it move through the earth, and it feels so tangible how they're moving it. It doesn't feel fake. It doesn't feel like artificial. It feels like somebody's touching that and they're moving it, and this is how this thing moves. And I really just kind of like that element in this film entirely. It feels like it's there. Like, even though I know it's a puppet and I know that it's not real, there's something really incredible. And as you're talking about, something that is being lost in the making of films about things that we can't actually touch being there.
Yeah, and also think about what they would do if it was CG, right? Well, because it was a limited budget and they knew they were making it as practical effects, they chose to make it underground monsters during the day that you can't see most of the time. And so they talk about how they built these little trenches and they rolled a ball through it so they could pull the dirt over top of it and have it just have this little rolly effect.
Yeah, make it look like a worm was running underneath.
But really it was just something that we're pulling along with a truck.
It was a buoy. Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about how you can have such an effect on the planet that we exist upon as is.
Yeah.
Use the intensity of the desert, the giant mountain ranges around you, the feeling of being restricted, the roads are cut off. They're all dirt roads as they are. You have no civilization around you. It's so isolating. It's so interesting that way. Whereas if it was CG, well, then suddenly we're going to build all these buildings around you, or we're going to have all these crazy spaceships, or we're going to see all these monsters. And then it just doesn't, what ends up happening is we forget to admire where we are, and we forget to admire what we have. And we think the only thing that's really interesting is if we're in space blowing everything up, as opposed to what's really interesting is we survive giant worms in the Sierra Nevada.
Well, it has the same sort of low key stakes as Jaws in essence. Like it's very similar to Jaws in a lot of its qualities, in the sense that like in Jaws you have three people that come from very different backgrounds who come together to hunt a shark, and knowing the backstory of Jaws, that the shark kept sinking. And that was part of the reason that we didn't see it that much in the film, was because they literally couldn't show it. So the idea that we always have to see the things makes it incredibly difficult to it makes it it's actually very limiting to be like, oh, we have to see it. Like you watch a bunch of films nowadays in which there's CG, and if you read reviews, you hear it all the time. And I think it's an interesting point that CG is still so bad.
Yeah.
In essence, it hasn't really got past Jurassic Park ever, but it's so bad that when it's in daylight, you can see that it's fake. So you have a lot of times where you have these climactic battles. I think of a bunch of Marvel films. You have climactic battles at night, so that you don't see the mistakes in the CG as much, because they don't have to light it. So we don't have to see it as much.
Is that why it's always at night?
Yes. It's because it's just like, it's easier to show something shitty in the dark because you can't see what it is anyway. Like we have a hard time as human beings seeing much at night. So of course they're shooting these things at night so that we don't have to see as much of what's happening as we would if it was in the day.
It's so interesting, because I actually love that this was all during the day. That was enough for me. It was really scary.
Yeah. It's like, I think about like It Follows, which is incredible because terror can attack you during the day.
Terror can be a slow moving old person.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. Like terror can be determination on somebody's face. It's just, it's such an interesting aspect of what they chose to do with this film, of being like, no, we're going to shoot it during the day for the most part, but we're going to not show everything, not show the monsters because they're underground. We just we can show little bits where they're moving around and they're moving the earth, and we know where they are. Like, I think one of the incredible things as well about this film is how clear the spatial relations of this town, where it is and what's happening there is. It's very clear how everybody gets around from place A to place B. Like it is super clear.
One road.
Yeah.
We established that early on, that you get cut off. We got to head across the land to get to the mountains. It's really far. We can see how far away the mountains are.
Yeah. It is very clear on what the parameters are, and even that gets to like how scary the monsters are with the first person that we find dead hiding up in the the electricity tower. It's like like what would scare a person to sit up there and die of dehydration rather than come down. Like it's a very clear film. Like it's a very straightforward, clear film with everything that's going on. And that gets down to even the characterization, like Val and Earl wanting to leave because they have literal shit work in this town. Like it's everybody's motivations, everybody's objectives are very, very clear, what they're trying to achieve, what they're doing about it, and what they want to do with their lives in this place. It is an incredibly well laid out film. Like it's kind of lovely in that regards.
And the relationships between the characters, I'm returning to this, are just delightful. Val and Earl are best friends. They live together in a tiny trailer. They work together all day long. They often sleep next to each other in the back of the pickup truck. They do whatever jobs they can get from like the 6 other people that live in town.
Yep.
This is a very small community and they are besties.
Yeah.
And it is really lovely to see 2 men having a healthy relationship together as friends. Maybe they're queer, maybe they're not. It's clear that we know Val falls for Rhonda. So there's some heteronormativity in that. But the point is just like, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
they love each other and that's enough.
Yeah, it's very, very clear that they love each other.
And there's nobody making fun of that and there's nobody minimizing that. And there's no one saying horrible homophobic things about it. It's just we're best friends and this is what we can afford. And there's nothing fucking wrong with that.
Yep.
And there's nothing fucking wrong with a scientist coming to town who's not going to get harassed. I mean, yeah, he immediately has a crush on her, but like, she's not worried for her safety. She's there for the university. She's studying. She's the new scientist that's just come. Nobody's like, I'm going to fucking rape her. Bullshit. None of that's coming up.
Yeah.
It's just nice and refreshing to be like, people don't suck.
They view each other as human beings, not as objects. Like they're like even Melvin, who they all fucking hate as a kid, who just keeps playing really shitty jokes, but really shitty kid jokes.
Yeah, and he's 14 or whatever. Like, it's perfect.
And who is it? It's Mindy. Who's on a pogo stick trying to outdo her number from the day before.
She's adorable.
Like all these characters are really, really clearly drawn and it's just really fucking lovely and sweet and kind.
And I love the little things they're setting up as traps along the way. Like you said, Mindy's pogo stick. She's bouncing that little sound, boom, boom, springing up and down that one little road. And what's the one thing that draws the worms? But the sound of that constant repetitive tapping.
Yep.
Like it's nice to, she's not on a bicycle. She's not on her roller skates. She's on a repetitive bouncing machine to like attract the monsters.
Yeah.
These are little touches that just add up.
They're all little setups. Like in that sense of like a joke is a setup and a punchline, these are all setups. Like they're like when discussing the genre of the film, a lot of the structure of it is setup and punchline. But that's also horror films. Is you set up this person is a murderer or going to hurt somebody, and then you show how they do it. Like the Friday the 13th films are just a great example, or the Nightmare on Elm Street. There's a setup. This is what they do. There's a setup, and this is what they do. Like, but comedy is the exact same way. I'm going to set something up, and this is how I'm going to punch it out. Like, like think of the ending of the film with Stampede. Like, it just came to me, Stampede, and the beginning of the film is Val waking up Earl with a fake stampede of 3 cows that couldn't be more bored eating grass in a field.
Right.
Like, it's. Like there's a setup and a punchline. There's a setup and a punchline. The preppers are set up as like, depending on how you want to view preppers, they're set up as maybe a joke, maybe extreme, but definitely preppers. And then the punchline is they are even more of that than you could imagine when you get to their gun room. The fact that they're reusing bullets. They're not only are they preppers, but they're environmentalists because they have solar panels that they talk about. They have their water filtration system. They are straight up environmentalists who happen to be preppers.
Yeah.
Like it is a like what kind of setup do you think? How can we subvert that setup? Here's the punchline. Like it is an incredible structure of writing that the two writers on the films made for this.
And that their joke was they're sitting on a rock at the end of the film, and he's like, and he lists all the things they have prepared for, but fucking underground monsters.
Yep.
We didn't know to prepare for that.
Right.
You know?
Like setup punchline.
So good.
Yeah.
But it just continuing to return to the cleanliness of the script and the kindness of the characters. It's just refreshing. And I can see why it didn't do well in the cinemas, because they didn't bother to figure out how to market it.
Right.
It really goes down to the failure of the marketing, because they didn't bother to spend time understanding what it was as opposed to putting it into a box. And I understand why it succeeded at video store rentals, because all it does is take one person and hand it to the next person, hand it to the next person.
Yeah.
And it just fall down that rabbit hole, because it's such a sweet, fun film.
And it's a film you want to share. Be like, oh my God, like this scene. Do you remember this scene? Do you remember the scene where like the doctor and his wife are building their house outside, and it's night, it's fucking beautiful,
So
all the
pretty.
stars, and then the graboid sucks down their generator, and then he gets sucked down, and then the graboid sucks down the car, and then there's the shot of the car lights beaming up into the sky and going out one by one. How fucking cool is that?
It's a great scene.
Right.
It's such a good surprise, and of course makes no sense. Why would it eat the generator, and why would it eat the car?
Right.
Who cares? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We learned from the documentary that actually that she was the woman, the doctor's wife, was supposed to punch out the windshield and then be standing on the hood of the car as she's getting sucked underneath, but that they couldn't get it to work because of the suction, the dirt, the fake dirt that they had was sucking up all the water
and becoming rock hard.
And they couldn't make the scene work. And so then it's also fun to watch it knowing that there was a lot of issues with the special effects, but they still pulled it off.
And that was the solve.
Yeah.
That, like, thinking of the simplicity of their solves, thinking of, there's something incredibly wonderful about the simplicity of this film as well, because like that solve, just show the lights going out, and it's cinematic and it's gorgeous. Like the simplicity of the solve of like, okay, so they play rock, paper, scissors to figure out who's going to do the chore, who's going to make breakfast in the morning. And then they later play rock, paper, scissors to see who's going to get the cat and run out in front of all the graboids to try to get to the machinery that could get them out. Like there's a simplistic thrust to all the choices that are being made.
Yeah. You don't have to make it super complicated.
No. Sometimes it's better if we all kind of understand the simplicity of the choice and like how as many handshakes as you can see that go on for like 5 minutes. Sometimes the handshake is just a handshake, and we just need that. Like we don't need all the superfluous motions around it. We just need a handshake, and we go along.
Yeah. Another thing I really liked was learning behind the scenes, learning that the cast and crew really found this to be a magical experience. It was really low budget. I think they did it pretty quickly in the desert, and yet they all felt this great reverence for the film and pride in their scrappiness. And one of the things I really strongly feel is that making art, especially on a low budget, is such a special experience. And too often, I know we've talked about this before, but too often I've found that people come into the process of making a movie and they have these expectations that it's not real unless you're a major motion picture house, or you have a trailer, or you're making a butt ton of money, or you're going to become super, super famous, or you're going to win an Oscar for it. And that's the only time it's valid, is when someone else is validating it with some other reason. And so I really appreciated how much this team really loved the process and loved how hard it was and how scrappy it was and how challenging it was and how much it pushed them to be creative. And this is including the actors. You know, Kevin Bacon talks about it. You have Michael Gross talking about how he didn't know it was going to change his life. And yet they also the director talks about how Michael Gross came in to do the audition, and he genuinely convinced him that there were bombs underneath his desk, and he had a lot of fun being the prepper character. And I just think it's really important to remember that when you have a chance to make art, if you are a filmmaker or if you work in the movies, appreciate every project you're working on, because you're doing the magic right then. That's the moment. This is the fun.
Yeah.
Whether or not it doesn't do nobody sees it but your parents, or it gets really big in the festival circuit, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
It's still a piece of art that needs to be valued, and enjoy your experience, because you never know how many you're going to get a chance to make.
Yeah, like that's very true for us, at least. Like, we have no idea how many other films we're going to make in our lives. Like, if it's one, if we've made the one that we've made, like what opportunities come up for us in the future and allow us to be creative. Like, I think that's the thing that I've learned looking back at our own film is I wish that I had spent more time enjoying the moment of making it rather than being focused on having to do it all as quickly and efficiently as possible. Like, there's something joyful like in that. Like, I know that, like, Kevin Bacon has talked about how he came to this film not sure if he wanted to be a guy who made films with rubber monsters, and that he had come to this film off of a string of disappointing box office films, and so he wasn't sure if his career was ending as well. And it doesn't sound like, from what he said, that in the moment he was enjoying that portion, and he was definitely disappointed when the film came out and it didn't do well. But you never really know what a film is going to do in its lifetime at all. Like, you can't view a film based on the opening weekend box office. Right. It just as you can't completely understand a friendship with somebody because you had drinks with them once.
Just like Van Gogh thought he was wildly unsuccessful.
Right. Like,
right. None of us really know what our art is going to do.
Yeah, we have to be, and this film is a really good example of, you have to be open to what the experience brings to you. Rather than being closed-minded to the idea that this is the only thing that you're going to get out of it. Because in the film, even that narrative holds true. Like, they don't know what's coming, but they're open to any possibilities, and being open to any possibilities allows them to be successful in the end.
Yes, I love that. That's perfect. Exactly. So let this be a metaphor for living your best life and having fun and being silly and making new friends.
Yeah, and don't let the worms under the earth eat you.
And don't let the worms eat you, if possible.
Yeah, that would be a terrible misgiving.
It'd just be such a bummer.
Yeah, it would be such a bummer.
Just make friends with your neighborhood preppers.
Right. Have a beer with them. Invite them over for a beer. In seriousness, like, we are all just kind of fucking around in this life. So to some degree, we have to be as non-serious about it all as we can. Like, I think about, like, with the breadth of cinema that you and I have, I think that there's a lot of silliness in this film, and I think that there's a lot of silliness in the works of Louis Buñuel as well. And thinking about how often he was willing to take the piss of the people that had exiled him from his native country, and thinking about the fact that he was still willing to see the world kind of in this jokey sort of manner of, like, it's all fucking ludicrous and stupid and bullshit, so let's make fun of it. Like, that carries some sort of similar weight to me than when I watch Tremors, of, like, a giant worm under the earth is eating people and chasing people around in the desert. I know. That's a fucking silly premise.
It's a great premise.
Like, it is not one to be taken seriously,
no.
But it also is one to be that all the members of this crew and cast took seriously and made it make sense and made the weight of what was happening feel valid.
Yeah, there were stakes and they valued them.
Yeah.
And I will say the next thing. I really liked the cinematography of it. It was very simple. It was very straightforward. But I liked that we had worm cam, essentially.
Yep.
And we had opportunities to be scared by the earth. And then we had opportunities to see the wide expanse of where they were, like appreciating the gorgeousness of the scenery
Yeah.
and the terrifyingness of hiding on a rock
Yeah.
and hoping you can make it to the truck.
Yeah, it was no less beautiful than watching High Sierra, and it was no less goofy than watching Evil Dead 2 with Evil Dead Cam.
Yeah, Evil Dead Camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really fun. Again, this is a film that is a great representation of people who are good at their craft.
Yeah.
And that is beautiful.
And people who were like, I remember the Patton Oswalt joke about deathbed, the bed that eats people, about people like that guy who like threw out his arm making the bed, like hammering away every day on a paycheck and being like, people are going to come see Deathbed, the bed that eats people. And I know that he meant that all as a joke. And I also know that there's been a critical reappraisal of that film and people are like, I kind of think it's actually good.
Okay, we need to watch it.
And all of that's to the side to say, the people who did the job on this, from Kevin Bacon, from Ron Underwood, to the writers, to the production designer, to the special effects people, they put in the work and they valued the product. And there's something incredible about that. Not people doing a half-assed job on a film about giant worms that eat people from underground. Like, because that could be a half-assed fucking film. But you watch Fred Ward go in this film, and you're like, that motherfucker is awesome.
Yeah.
I love everything he's fucking doing.
He's having a blast.
Yeah, because he's like, fuck it. I get to run around in the desert for a few weeks, like pretending that worms are chasing me. Great. I got a pitch for this.
Seriously, that is the whole purpose of this film.
Yeah.
Have fun at your job. Be silly. Have a good time. Show up. Do your best. Know your lines and know what order they come in.
Yeah. Fucking love
And
this film.
scene.
Yeah. Thank you for spending this time with us to listen today to the podcast. You can support us by watching our film Citywide on Amazon Prime.
Normally, this is where we would suggest a stumble upon of what you should watch next. And instead, we have a new concept. It's going to be Dare You to Watch. And we are starting a Patreon where it's free. There will be no charges for memberships. But join us there and we will have little short burst podcast episodes and lots of articles and lots of fun background information on what we're going to be doing this next year, which is making a series of films. We will be filming a whole bunch of short films this next year, among other projects. And we're really excited to be documenting them from behind the scenes on our Patreon.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. And that is where you're going to get your stumble-upons from now on.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us here today. As always, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Fishtown Films.
On Patreon.
Yes. And if you want to reach out to us, just DM us on Instagram or YouTube. That's probably the best way to get in touch with us. And otherwise, we just really appreciate your time and we hope you're watching some fun things this holiday.
Yeah, something with blood.
Yes, the gorier the better.
Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we can start rebuilding ourselves and find our own communities in 2025 and make something great out of it.
So dig into your art and tend your garden and let's just rebuild.
And know that you have friends.